Australia is the world's smallest continent. It is comprised of very old and withered stones or rocks. Australia and Tasmania, they are together along with a group of islands. Australia is almost double the area of India and Pakistan combined. Australia is a continent which lies entirely in the southern hemisphere. Latitudinally, it lies between 10 degrees south and 44 degrees south, and longitudinally it lies between 113 degrees east and 154 degrees east. The name Australia is derived from the Latin word australis, which itself means in the southern hemisphere. The Tropic of Capricorn cuts this continent almost into half. Australia is surrounded by water bodies such as the Indian Ocean to the west, the Southern Ocean to the south, the Pacific Ocean to the east. Also, there are several seas and other water bodies that surrounds Australia, like the Timor Sea, the Arafura Sea, the Gulf of Carpentaria in the north, and the Coral Sea separates Australia from the island of Indonesia. Australia has several neighbors, and the closest one is Asia. Although the island of Timor is just 720 km from the city of Darwin. Across the Indian Ocean lies Asia, and around 8,000 km apart lies Africa. The continent of Antarctica lies to the south of Australia, around 3,200 km across the South Sea. The immediate neighboring countries of Australia are Papua New Guinea, Indonesia and East Timor, the Solomon Islands in Vanuatu, and New Zealand in the southeast. The Commonwealth of Australia has 6 states and 2 territories, and the Australian government is a federal government, which means Australia has 2 sets of governments, one for each state and one for the center. Australia is one of the lowest continents of the world. It has no high mountain ranges like the Himalayas, no long rivers like the Amazon, or no river valleys like the Brahmaputra. The highest peak of Australia is Mount Kosciuszko, which is just 2,228 meters above sea level. Even the coastline of Australia is smooth with no inlets except in the south. Thus, Australia is having very good harbours, but they are very few in number. Australia is a land of varied physical features, and it has been divided into 4 main physical divisions, namely the Great Western Plateau, the Central Lowlands, the Eastern Highlands and the Coastal Plains. Located in the western part of the continent lies the Great Western Plateau, which covers almost 2/3 of Australia. It is made up of huge blocks of ancient rocks. These are the oldest rocks of the continent, and many of them are more than 3,500 million old. These hard rocks have been worn down into several smaller blocks of plateaus, forming low-lying basins and deserts. Almost 70% of the Great Western Plateau is covered by desert. The central part of the plateau is actually covered by three great deserts like the Great Sandy Desert, the Gibson Desert and the Great Victoria Desert. Here, plenty of sand dunes, sandy plains and salt lakes are covering most of the surface, and it rains very less here. To the south of these deserts and to the north of the Great Australian Bight lies the Nullarbor Plain. This is a vast limestone plateau that slopes gently to the south. It is a very flat and treeless expanse. The plains have formed huge underground caverns which are actually formed by the flowing of river through these limestone rocks. And here they give rise to certain caves. One of the famous examples of these caves are Mullamullang Cave, and one of the striking features are the formation of stalactites and stalagmites. Stalactites and stalagmites are actually the beautiful formations which are found inside limestone caves. When the water drips into these caves, it dissolves the calcium or the calcite from the walls of the caves. The dripping water leaves behind traces of calcites on the roofs of the caves. These deposits slowly build up until icicle-shaped formations are created. These are known as stalactites and they hang down from the roofs of the caves. Water drips from the tips of the stalactites onto the floors of the caves. It leaves deposits of calcite there as well. Over the passage of time, stalagmite forms from the floors. They often look like heaps of molten wax. Even sometimes stalactites and stalagmites join and form pillars or columns. Several mountain ranges surround the Great Western Plateau. Some of these are in the north, the King Leopold Range, the Hampsley Range, which forms the largest iron ore deposit, lies towards the west. Apart from these, the Musgrave and the MacDonald Range lies to the central part of the plateau. Between the Musgrave and the MacDonald Ranges lies the Uluru or the Ayers Rock, which is a single isolated rock. It has a height of 348 meters. Further south lies the Mount Lofty Range and the Flinders Range, which forms Asia's largest mountain ranges. The Great Western Plateau is divided into several smaller plateaus, which includes the Kimberley Plateau and the Ilgurn Plateau and the Pilbara Plateau. The special feature of this plateau region is the Rift Valley system. This region has undergone extensive block faulting. As a result, there are several block mountains found here like Mount Lofty, Flinders Range and the Barrier Range. The river valleys that have been filled here are filled by the sea water, which includes the Spencer Gulf and the Gulf St. Vincent. The Central Lowlands. This is a low-lying region between the Western Plateaus and the Eastern Highlands. This region can be further divided into three lowland groups like the Carpentaria Basin, the Lake Erie Basin and the Murray-Darling Basin. The Carpentaria Basin occupies the northern part of the central lowlands, which is drained by three rivers, Gregory, Lichard and Flinders, which flows northwards into the Gulf of Carpentaria. The Lake Erie Basin in south-central Australia is a vast region of internal drainage. Here, a number of rivers are draining into the Lake Erie, which is a saltwater lake. The rivers flow very slowly and due to the evaporation rate which is very high, during the dry season the rivers dry up and leaves behind shiny salt flats and lakes. Although during the heavy rainfall, the rivers flow directly into the Lake Eyre and Lake Yamayama. Some of these inland rivers are Georgiana, Diamantina, and Cooper Creek. In the southern part of the Central Plains lies the Murray-Darling Basin, which is drained by the Murray River, the Darling River, and the Murrumbidgee River. These rivers carry huge amounts of silts, which deposit over the plains, making the plains very fertile. Even the Murray-Darling Basin is one of the most important agricultural regions for Australia. However, the highest part of the country is found in the Eastern Highlands that stretches around 3,700 km along the eastern edge of Australia. The Eastern Highlands are watersheds. It has number of rivers that flows either eastwards towards the Pacific Ocean or westwards towards the central lowlands. As the Eastern Highlands acts as the watershed, hence it is also known as the Great Dividing Range. Many of Australia's main rivers originate in these highlands, like the Snowy River flows down from the steep eastern slope, while the Darling and the Murrumbidgee River flows down through the gentle western slope. These Eastern Highlands have been known by different names like Blue Mountains in the New South Wales, Snowy Mountains further south, and Australian Alps further in the southern direction. And the highest peak of the Eastern Highlands is Mount Kosciuszko. It lies in the Australian Alps. To the east of the Eastern Highlands lies the coastal plain, which is a narrow strip of land between the eastern coastal plain and the sea. This area receives relatively a very high amount of rainfall. As a result, most of Australia's main cities, including Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, are located here, which are the most densely populated parts of Australia. One of Australia's largest natural beauty is the Great Artesian Basin. It is the largest artesian basin in the world, which covers most of Queensland and parts of New South Wales, South Australia, and the Northern Territory. An artesian basin is a low-lying region which is formed by a layer of pervious rock in between two layers of impervious rocks. It is in the shape of a saucer. The permeable rock is sandwiched between two layers of impermeable rocks. Rainwater seeps into an aquifer and moves downwards due to the force of gravity until it reaches to the lowest part of the basin. The impermeable layers above and below the aquifer does not allow the water to escape to upwards or downwards. Therefore, the water gets trapped in the aquifer and is held under great pressure. Here, when a well is bored anywhere in this artesian basin, water shoots out like a fountain. These artesian wells are blessings for the dry regions. So, we have enough water available for the cattle and sheep rearing in these regions. Another most important natural wonder lies to the eastern coast of Australia, which is the Great Barrier Reef. It is formed by millions of tiny living creatures called the coral polyps. Coral polyps are tiny, soft-bodied organisms with hard, protective skeletons made of limestone. The polyps attach themselves to rocks on the seafloor. Over time, the polyps join together to create a colony. Over thousands of years, these colonies grow and spread to form reefs. Even when a polyp dies, the hard limestone outer covering or the outer shell continues to be a part to form the reef. The coral reef just appears above the surface as low islands. Corals are found in colonies in shallow, warm tropical areas, and they grow close to the surface of the water to absorb sunlight. Coral reefs are important as they support more than one-fourth of all the living creatures of the seas. This 2,000-kilometer long Great Barrier Reef lies across the eastern coast of Queensland in the Pacific Ocean. The Great Barrier Reef is home to a number of marine plants and animals. Various species of whales, dolphins, turtles, porpoises can be found in the reef. Even 10% of the world's entire fish population is found here. The reef attracts a lot of tourists throughout the year who can wade or scuba dive or sail in boats with transparent viewing floats to visit the corals. The underwater coral gardens have a wide variety of fish swimming about. However, bigger ships or tankers are not allowed over the corals for the preservation of these corals. However, the increasing amount of global warming is a serious threat to the existence of the Great Barrier Reef. Hence, urgent steps are required to prevent it and save it.